Saddle discomfort is something that affects everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Tour de France racer, a weekend warrior, or a casual commuter, because choosing the correct saddle for you is very important. But knowing what saddle to choose can seem an impossible task to get right. Do you need loads of padding? Do you need a cutout? Do you need a wide or narrow fit? Or maybe it's not even the saddle causing your problems, but it's how it's positioned. So to help you understand what could be best for you, myself and Ollie have asked expert bike fitter Jake Yarrington from Precise Performance to share his tips, advice and secrets that should enable you to sit comfortably on the bike.
Right, Jake, bike fit expert. We want to focus on saddles here, not only how people can improve the comfort of their bike, but also if saddles as a whole are going to evolve generally throughout the period of time, because generally they're kind of like the same shape. So let's talk about where we can start with making sure people choose the right saddle and how the technologies differ.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing around buying a saddle is making sure that the width of the saddle supports you properly. And that isn't necessarily the width of the sit bone, which is commonly out there. It's more around sort of that sort of rotational forward support, making sure we actually sit and connect into the sort of section here, basically. Okay, which means you're going to naturally just kind of rotate into that point. Do we need a cutout? I think so. Most people do need a bit of relief there, both men and women. And then the wing width as well here. They come in different widths. There's certain brands out there that are quite wide, like a ping pong paddle. Are they going to catch on the thighs? Yeah, probably. Okay, so we need to find something which is going to not catch there and force people to sit forward.
So overall shape is the most important aspect to get right.
Yeah, shape and size, I'd say.
And that's based predominantly off like that kind of rough sit bone area.
Yeah. It's a bit of an old school way. I've kind of moved away from it quite heavily. We don't really need to measure sit bone width because we don't actually sit on our sit bones.
If we look at saddles, I think from maybe like an entry level perspective, or someone that's not like a hardcore cyclist, you're going to look at this saddle and you're going to go, surely this one's uncomfortable, and surely one that's like this, or maybe with even more padding and more wider and more like a sofa armchair style, surely that one will be more comfortable.
Yeah.
Is that the case? And if not, why is that the case?
So less padding is generally more comfortable.
Okay.
And this is a little bit dependent. Saddles is one of the hardest things because it's dependent on the person themselves, their personal perspective. More padding means you kind of sink into that saddle. The more padding as well can actually create more instability. Okay. So your pelvis can then sort of rock more side to side, which can then translate into like knee pain, saddle sores because you're physically moving, especially if your shorts don't kind of back up that too much.
So there's lots of different areas to look at to start with. Something that we've spoken about in the past has been different levels and qualities of bib shorts. Some have got really thick padding, some have got thin padding, some bib shorts have got gel elements incorporated into them, similar to like what some saddles will have gel elements incorporated into them. So how do you think the short that you're wearing interacts with the saddle that you've got? Because say you're maybe even a commuter, you've jumped on your bike to ride across town, you might not have a bib short on, so should you have a padded saddle there, or is your bib short fighting against it, like in different areas?
Yeah, I think if you focus on the bib short, I mean, a lot of the time we get a lot of like overhang of short around this area here, which then creates like a rub on the skin, which then creates saddle sores, which obviously we've all had them. They're uncomfortable. No one wants them. It's the thing we want to stay away from the most. So one thing I think would be good is having a short which is kind of made around the saddle shapes. I know they've kind of already done that anyway, but around specific shapes of a saddle.
Like, should saddle manufacturers be making shorts as well, or should short manufacturers be making saddles as well?
Yeah, I think there'd be a great crossover, or even they just talk a little bit more. That would be the best scenario, is that they can just talk a little bit more and make a few adaptations to it. But it all comes down to body shape, body size, muscle depth, muscle mass in the thighs, because if your shorts tighter, there's going to be less overhang and that sort of thing.
So what can people do to try and improve their experiences? Because it feels like a minefield if you walk into a shop. What advice can you give for where to start?
To be fair, actually, very valid point there about not knowing how or where you are sat on the saddle. So sometimes it's very obvious, and you see someone riding, you think, well, I can see half of the saddle.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's a problem there, you know. So maybe setting up a little camera if you've got a turbo trainer and seeing where you sit on the saddle. You may not know, granted, because not everyone's a bike fitter, not everyone's a saddle expert, you know. So that would be a good way. And you think, actually, maybe I'm not sat in the right place. And then that then leads on to other things, bike fit. Do you need this? Do you need that? And then the other thing is trying to experiment around what saddle actually works for you. So trying to find a brand or brands that offer like a 30-day trial.
That's a really good point.
So you can go and ride them, because you're not really going to truly know by sitting on a turbo trainer for 2 or 3 minutes, God, that's perfect, you know.
Just going back to what we were talking about with the saddle padding and stuff like that, do you think there's ever a case or an argument that padding on a saddle doesn't need to exist if you've got the right saddle shape as good as you could possibly get it?
With a padded short.
Yeah, if you've got a padded bib short on, and you've got the correct shape, size, every aspect of the saddle is as good as it could be, in theory, does that mean the padding is redundant on the saddle?
In a way, I'd probably agree with say yes. If you look at sort of the old school like Brook saddles, and there's some saddles out there like Cello Italia make them with just the carbon layer. Mm-hmm. You know, people love them. You know, people do generally love them. They often put off in the price, unfortunately, but they do love them, and it's too much of a risk on try. But they do love them. Yeah.
I think it's important to discuss price here as well. This is often something we talk about, whether the additional amount of money you're going to spend, say if a product is twice the price, does it mean that it's twice the performance? We talk about it all the time with group sets.
Yeah.
Is that a concept that you think we can apply to saddles? Just because a saddle is more expensive or it's got a super lightweight or carbon fibre base, does that necessarily mean it's better in terms of overall performance and comfort?
I would say not in comfort, no.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a load of benefits around the weight and everything that adds to the bike, but in terms of comfort, I'd say no.
Because Si says this, he's in his head, he thinks that the sort of alloy railed saddle is more comfortable than the carbon railed saddle.
Yeah.
I disagree. I've never had an issue with it personally. I think it's in his head.
Yeah.
This is another aspect, comes down to personal perspective. So people say to me all the time, they're like, so what saddle should I use? I'm like, I don't know. In a way, and they're like, what saddle do you use? And I'm like, well, what I actually use the same as you, and I love it. And I think it's probably one of my most popular saddles in the studio. But what I use, what my initial, like what I think, that could work for you, is doesn't actually matter, if you know what I mean. It's all about how it fits that individual. And sometimes you have to try a few just to get it right. It's the hardest area during a bike fit to establish and get right, because you don't know what that person's feeling.
And saddles are a consumable part, right? They're gradually going to wear out, either through damage because you're leaning your bike up against the wall and scuffing it, or you've crashed or whatever. But how does a saddle wear out? How's that a thing?
Yeah, I mean, the materials underneath kind of get a bit softer, a bit like the shoes, you know,
so
sort
your
of
saddle goes saggy.
Of shoes getting soft, shoes getting softer over time and sort of wearing out on the heel. It's kind of the similar sort of thing. They can drop on one side because of maybe weight distribution between the human body, because we're not balanced. So that could then cause dropping of a hip. Maybe you're unstable, maybe you hold your foot differently. And it just sort of, that aspect of it can wear out. Obviously, rails can snap. You know, and quite commonly I see the sort of like the central part, like here, kind of snapping, where they've quite often not sat in the right place, or hit a massive pothole and just the weight's gone all the way through it and it's caused an issue. But they do wear out, yeah.